Good evening and welcome to the City of Pasco Council Workshop Meeting. The council thanks you for being a part of our city government. At all workshop meetings, the council discusses issues, but no formal action is taken. The agenda packet is available on the City of Pasco's website at www.pasco-wa.gov/agenda. Please note that the city council meetings continue to be held remotely and may be accessed through GoToWebinar. This meeting is being also televised live on Pasco TV, channel 191, on Spectrum Cable in Pasco and Richland, and also streamed on the city's Facebook page, website, and YouTube channel. This and previous council meeting video is available on the city's website. Through proclamation number 20-28, Governor Inslee extended a directive making temporary changes to Open Public Meetings Act. These virtual meetings will continue until the OPMA restrictions are lifted. Lastly, the public may submit their comments and/or questions for items not on the agenda by contacting the city manager or the city clerk or using the feedback form on the city's website. And also would like to just keep consistent with making sure that we are communicating, that we are social distancing. There's nobody in this room that's within, I would say, 10 feet, maybe even 12. And using our masks at all times. We have sanitizers and sanitizing wipes and hand sanitizer in the back. Everything's been sanitized, and we just want to continue to communicate that to ensure that we are all doing, taking precautions and practicing social distancing and taking all the precautions necessary to try to prevent the spread. Also, would like to just inform the council, if you haven't already done so, to please refresh your agenda packets. There was a glitch in the system and may have taken some of the items out of order, but if you could just refresh your agenda items on your iPads, that would be wonderful. And with that, next, we would like, if you could all rise for the flag salute, please. Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. And next, we will have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Alvarado.
Present.
Councilmember Maloney.
Present.
Councilmember Milne.
Present.
Councilmember Roach.
Roach, are you on the line?
Councilmember Serrano.
Yes. Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Barajas.
Present.
And Mayor Martinez.
Present. Did we get,
We did not hear from Mr.
Zara, are you on the line?
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Councilmember Roach did email me. She said she is on, so.
Okay.
Great. That's
So
7 accounted for, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Just a moment. There. Councilmember Roach, are you there?
Hi, I'm here. Thank you for unmuting me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Roach. Good to have you here this evening. So next, we're going to go to the, next on the agenda items, we'll go to verbal reports from council members. Does anybody have anything they would like to share that they did maybe last week, or anything they'd like to comment on?
This is Mayor Pro Tem Barajas.
Yes, Ms. Barajas, how you doing?
Good. How's everyone doing?
Good, good.
Just want to share. It didn't happen during the week. It happened today. I had an informal invite to the training center, or fire department's training center, where I was able to experience and see how our Richland and Pasco fire department works together in their training sessions, and walked into the facility. It's just awesome the way they're training, the heat, the pressure, the adrenaline rush that they go through to be able to keep their training up to date and to help save lives. So just wanted to share and send a shout out to Richland and Pasco Fire Departments for allowing me to observe their trainings. Yeah, it was really awesome to be out there and see for myself. Just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Barajas. Anybody else? I'll just share real quickly. I attended our weekly meetings. We had a co-op meeting on Friday where the local leaders and the staff get together and give a report of things that are going on with the COVID and where we're at. Our health district personnel informed us that, we seem to be not increasing in numbers, perhaps moving in the right direction. So we just know at this time that wearing masks and taking precautions is still effective and a good way to go to lower our numbers. Also, we just want to communicate to business owners and our residents and citizens always to go to the City of Pasco website for information that may be valuable to them as far as some of the requirements for businesses and some of the events that are going on within the City of Pasco. So also attended a Pasco Chamber Luncheon today where our Superintendent of Schools, Michelle Whitney, gave a presentation with school right around the corner 3 weeks from now. All the different programs and opportunities are going to be to get school, to get it started. We're very well aware that most people or many people would like to get back to a normal type of atmosphere and have our kids go back to school, but at this time, that's not possible, at least at this moment. And Michelle Whitney and her staff are making arrangements to ensure that every one of our kids are going to get the services that they need. And one of the things that I was very impressed with is that every student will have an iPad that will be given to them by the school district so that they can help in their education process. It is going to be an inconvenience, maybe, perhaps, for many people, but we just need to step up and do what we got to do to make sure our kids are taken care of and get this transition from where we're at today to a better place as soon as possible. So thank you, Michelle Whitney, for the presentation today. I know they're working very hard and it's real demanding in the position that they're in as well. So we'll hope the best for them and hope that school can get started safely. So if there's nobody else, we'll move right along for items for discussion. We'll start with Fire and Ambulance 2019 Performance Report. Chief Bob Gear, are you on?
Yes, Mayor, I am on. I'm home. And Deputy Chief Dunbar actually prepared the report and will probably walk you through the slides that he has for it. Were you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Dunbar, who seems to be paused.
I'll share my web camera so you can see that I'm sitting here in the office. Good night, Council, Mayor, everybody. Too bad we're not in council chambers. It's a little bit different presenting here from my desktop. Hopefully everybody can hear me. And we'll go ahead and get started in on the performance report. So last year was my first year presenting this. This is the second year of doing this presentation. It's just going to go a quick overview of what we did over 2019 and some of the things we have planned out for 2020. So next slide, please. One of the big things that drives where we're at is our strategic plan. And as you can see, in Mayor Pro Tem Barajas probably recognizes the prop there in the picture. because that's a picture from our recruit academy this last year, training in the prop. In the strategic plan, we've got 3 major areas that we concentrate on: service delivery, succession planning, and health and safety. And after we reviewed it this year for 2019, we've identified that we've completed just about all the objectives and targets we could have, or we have got different programs in process throughout everything. Just quick running down: stations 83 and 84 replacement, those are in process. If you have a chance, please go drive by the construction sites. We're making really good progress on that. The regional training facility, that's been in use, as was demonstrated today, and our training officer and staff are really using that to its fullest benefit. Equipment storage locations, that's in process with some of the remodels we've got going on. The fleet maintenance is an ongoing effort between us and city shops. Consolidation of the dispatch centers was actually completed in 2018, but that was identified in the strategic plan. Succession planning, we've got several of those that are all ongoing because that's kind of a moving target, and those will get updated here in what we'll talk about in just a second. Very similar with the health and safety. One of the things that we constantly strive to do is maintain a good, healthy workforce. And I'm sure that was witnessed today during our hands-on training when we had Mr. Fans and shade and rehab set up for all the firefighters going through the training on one of the hotter days this week. So with that, we looked at our strategic plan, and it's time to start and redo another strategic plan. We actually have a contract out, and we're going to have one of our officers come in and work on that during the rest of this year to get us into where we need to go, using that strategic plan to look at about 3 to 5 years out, build on what we did and continue to go from there. So that's a pretty significant achievement of where we're going. And again, it just lays out where we're going to go. Next slide. Tied in with that strategic plan are the council goals. And this by no means lists all of the council goals. And I know the council has yet to have a chance to get their retreat together to set the newest ones. So these are actually a little bit old, but they are still valid for us. And that's where we're at right now. So the 3 main parts are quality of life, financial stability, and then community safety. We're always trying to deliver our service very efficiently and effectively, maintaining our programs, looking at our strategic plan, seeing where we can grow things, take advantage of opportunities, and perform where we need to go. Financial stability goes kind of hand in hand with that. Evaluate the costs of what we're trying to do. How can we keep up with the growth without becoming too expensive, and maintain where we need to go with the future of the city, as well as being efficient with the tax dollars. And then directly related to us in the fire department is the community safety piece. Our WSRB rating went down to a class 3 back in early 2019, and we're pretty proud of that. And now we've got to work on our plan to maintain that class 3 rating, which is going to take quite a bit of work, which is another project that will be certainly identified out of the strategic plan update that we'll do. And actually we'll have another officer come in and work on our 5-year maintenance program for maintaining that rating of class 3 so our insurance rates don't go back up. And as part of that, we've got the last goal there that we have of achieving and maintaining the target fire response times. One of those things was addressed directly by relocating Station 83 from Road 68 in Argent up to Road 76 in Sandifer, where most of our calls in that area, not most of, but several of our calls are located north of the interstate. So we weren't maintaining that response time. By relocating that station up there, I'm encouraged and anxious to see what that's going to do to reduce our response time to that part of the city, while keeping Station 84 that we put in service in July of 2018 south of the interstate. So while we're moving one and slightly relocating another one, that should help cover the whole west side a little bit better. And as part of that, we are looking out in the future. We've got land purchased for Station 85. So when the Broadmoor area takes off, we can maintain that target fire response time there as well. In fact, we're waiting to hear from the federal government on a SAFER grant that we've applied for that is designed to staff that fire station as we move forward. So, but with everything else, things are where they're at. One of the things we always try to achieve and do is constantly follow our mission statement that is there on the screen: honorably protect and serve our community, which talks to all three of the council goals areas that we looked at. Next slide. So looking at where we're at in terms of performance, which is what we're talking about with the performance report this year, we looked at this several years ago. Now retired Deputy Chief Dave Hare put together the pillars of excellence as part of the whole plan with the master and strategic plan that they did before. And we've identified the 5 areas that basically support the Pasco Fire Department as we move forward. So with operational readiness, community wellness, cost containment, performance, and then quality, those are the pillars that we stand on, and those are the things we're trying to measure and determine how excellent are we doing that as we move forward with the Pasco Fire Department, especially as we grow and continue to change and meet all the demands that are constantly thrown our way. So we've got a couple of different documents that we use to base that on. Obviously, our master and strategic plan, which we talked about just a minute ago, and we'll be updating that strategic plan, as I said, in late 2020. And we'll probably look at our master plan sometime after that. Maintaining that WSRB rating so we keep the insurance rates low is key to that. There are some very key metrics in the WSRB rating system that we need to measure and see if we're keeping ahead of the curve, maintaining ground, or losing ground. So those are some of the things we look at, especially in the performance area. And then finally, the city council goals, what you guys would like to establish for us. We need to make sure that we're performing to the levels of excellence and performance that you guys would like to have us perform to. You're a direct representative for the city and the community, so any feedback we get from you, we need to obviously put that inside of that. So with that, we've established many key performance indicators. We're always developing new ones or trying to make sure that we're hitting the right ones. We monitor them, we evaluate the status, and then we review and change either the performance or figure out a metric doesn't work and try a different metric and move on. As part of this, our records management system and a new software program we're using called NFORS, which is the National Fire Operating Reporting System. It's actually a web-based system that lets us drill down into very minute detail and see what's driving those key performance indicators so we can adjust them and figure out the right piece of metric to do. So we're always looking for those key performance indicators to reflect what our true performance is in terms of what really matters. So all that input from those 3 documents or the 3 elements are one of the keys to the pillars of excellence. Next slide. So one of the things that we did this year is we were able to talk about some of our technical competence, and what really helped us achieve that WSRB rating was our technical competence when it comes to IFSAC certifications. IFSAC is an international fire service accreditation college, and basically it sets the bar based on NFPA standards. And if you meet those, we're able to reduce some of the deficiency points in WSRB. It also frees up some of our firefighters' time for training. For every higher level of certification, we get to reduce the number of hours required that we have to hit every year, so we can concentrate on more specific training like Councilmember Barra saw this morning. As you can see, we're not at 100% for Firefighter 1 yet, but we have 1 person that's outstanding. So we've gone up a little there. Firefighter 2, we made some really good strides. Our recruit academy that we run jointly with Kennewick and Richland, when we bring in new people, they're getting the both Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2 certifications before they graduate. So they're coming out of academy with those 2 certifications. one of the big jumps we made this year was in our fire officer certifications. We were a little bit lagging behind, and actually we made some big jumps this year. All of our line officers are at least a Fire Officer 1 certified. So that really helps build the integrity because each one of the certifications has some education and benchmark things that they have to meet with each one of those certifications. In addition to those line officers, we've got another 10 firefighters who are now eligible to test for officers who are either Fire Officer 1 or Fire Officer 2. So they've gone above and beyond what their job description is in order to meet that. So that really helps. It comes back to, if you understand your boss's job, you can help him do their job better if you take some of that load off of them. So when you have the qualifications of those working underneath of you, you work better together as a team. So basically, if you look at the bottom line, we're now at 40% of our personnel are Fire Officer 1 qualified. Is that a good number? It's a very good number. I don't think that's going to go up. We really don't want to have every firefighter be Fire Officer 1 qualified. It would be nice, but that's kind of an unrealistic goal. 25% of our personnel are Fire Officer 2, which is a 50% increase from where we were at last year. You can see we went from 8% up to 16%. So we're actually getting our fire officers those extra little certifications through the development and the officer development training and experience. So we've been very successful in that. So we're doing very well in our technical competence. Following on to that is the next slide, training. That again, Councilmember Barajas got to see firsthand this morning, and I would encourage any of the council members, if you want to come out and take a look, notify us, and we can have you come down and take a look. We've maintained a very high level of training throughout the last 3 years. We almost hit our 200 required hours in 2017. 2018 we went up, and in 2019 we maintained that high standard. And that's not just those training hours that are going to maintain that WSRB rating. That also includes our special operations, our land technical rescue, our water rescue, our hazmat technicians training, as well as EMS, because none of the EMS training actually counts towards WSRB. So to hit the WSRB, it takes quite a bit, and we're doing a very good job with that. You can see the shifts are all maintaining a very high level in the graph on the left there. They're all doing a very good job to maintain their training. So that's pretty good there. That leads into the next slide of operational readiness, which basically you take and say, this is what we're doing. This is how well we're performing. This chart shows our unit hour utilization, basically how busy are our units out of a 24-hour day, which most people don't think that it's that much. And if you look at it, well, they're only busy 12% of the day. Well, we're also doing inspections, we're cleaning, we're doing training. And then, of course, since they are here for 24 or 48 hours, they do get a chance to sleep and rest on the job as well. So maintaining that high level of unit hour utilization and monitoring that is one of the key things. If we ever hit 25%, which we're only about halfway there on a couple of our apparatus, we would then consider adding additional resources or staffing to those stations or those units to assist with calls. As you hit 25% utilization, you're pretty much running nonstop, and you don't get a chance to come down for meal breaks, rest, get your training done. So your quality of performance kind of starts to be impacted when you're above 25%. As you can see, I've got 3 years here. You can see that with engine 2814 or station 84 being added, you can see their unit hour utilization has come way up, which has taken some off of station 83, especially taken some off of station 82. What's that's doing is basically leveling the load across those stations throughout their response area, keeping them more in service and ready to go. So this is one of those key metrics that we look at to determine staffing levels, resource utilization. And this information, what we call UHU, in conjunction with how we're doing with concurrent calls, i.e. multiple calls happening at the same time, that will drive us when we start adding additional resources, either units or stations, those kind of things. So that's the operational readiness. The next slide's got our incidents by category, and I know it's kind of a small chart, but you can see the biggest chunk of the pie there is our rescue and EMS, which is basically what we do there specifically about 80% of the time. And if you combine a couple of other call types we have in with our categories, there are service calls at 6%. About half of those are what we call lift assists, where somebody has just fallen or can't get up and needs an assistance getting from up off the floor back into bed or something, or they've tripped and fallen and they just don't have the resources at home to help them up. So if you add that in, which is truly an EMS call, we're at almost 81% of our calls are for EMS reasons. So that's why we need to look at that. That's why we've made some investments in what we'll talk about here in a little while with our PRN, Pasco Resource Navigator program that addresses some of our chronic EMS users. So that's just kind of an overall view of where we're at. Do we still have fires? Yeah, but it's only 4% of the time. And that speaks to a lot of the work done by our CRR and our inspections folks, and also just the nature of the neighborhoods. People are paying attention. So we still have fires, we're still a fire department, but a majority of what we do is that EMS portion. So where are those incidents located? On the next slide, you'll see a little bit different version of the ever-loved heat map. This is actually a picture out of one of our new programs, the Enforce program, that identifies where our calls are happening. And you can still see in the center part of Pasco, that's where a majority of our calls are still located. The bigger and darker the circles, the more calls in that area that we have. And those two big purple dots right in the center of the screen, right below the 395, 182 interchange, is Tri-City Retirement and Avalon Retirement Home. Those are both of our assisted living facilities, and we go there quite often. So that's what you can see, those type of facilities drive our calls. Looking up to the northwest, you can see it's kind of spread out a little bit more evenly. And on that north side, that's why we decided to move Station 83 to the north side of the interstate to address the amount of calls up there. So hopefully that'll help our response time and go into there. One of the nice things about this particular program is we can, as I said earlier, we can drill down and find out exactly what's driving those specific calls right down to the specific address, which units are there, and how they're performing in terms of response times and those kind of things. And speaking of response times, our next slide shows our overall total response time performance. We've actually been increasing our performance by decreasing the amount of the response time. So last year we reported that we had an 8-second increase from 582 to 574. This year we actually dropped down quite a bit to 553 seconds from time of dispatch to arrival, 90% of the time, which is pretty good. It's still significantly above our target, according to NFPA 1710, which sets the target at 480 seconds, but we're making progress. One of the things that I'm encouraged to see or are anxious to see is once we move into Station 83 in its new location, how much that's going to change that response time, because Station 83 actually makes up about 1/3 of our calls. So that's going to have a fairly significant impact on that response time by relocating that station north of the interstate. And we should see a really good decrease in our response times with that almost 2,000 calls that we run in that area. So those things are just one of the things that continues to improve. The next slide shows how we're doing on some basic EMS information. One of the things that everybody likes to look at is how do we manage cardiac arrests? How do we do in terms of when you have a heart attack and need CPR, what's the outcome? How well are we doing? How are we performing? How many people survive that catastrophic event and are released from the hospital with good cognitive facilities and actually are able to walk out of the hospital. Well, in 2019, I'm happy to report that our guys have been working really hard. And if you look at that bottom right chart, our what's called the Utstein etiology survival rate is at 62%, which means 2 out of 3 people who have that witnessed heart attack and die right there in front of somebody, they end up walking out of the hospital, which is a pretty good result because the national average is only 10%. So we're miles ahead of our national comparables for right now. Now, I will tell you that that does change and it's highly variable depending upon the year. Last year, we were, I think, much lower than 62%, but we were always trying to improve there. Where are we seeing the cardiac arrests? Most of them are still in your home or in a healthcare facility. There's occasionally, we have them in a street or a highway, or there's very few that are in public or in the business that are out there that we have identified by location. So the best, what I can say there is teach your family how to do CPR and call 911 and take care of yourself so you don't have to do that in the first place. And as you can see in the age group, it's those that are 50 and over that are experiencing those cardiac arrest rates. So, but it's kind of one of those things, that's where, those are the people who are driving the EMS calls initially. 65, those that are 65 and over drive a majority of our EMS calls, which as you can see is kind of what's represented in the chart on the left. So that's some of the EMS information. Along this line, we've started a program this year called PRN that I mentioned earlier. It's called the Pasco Resource Navigator. We actually hired a individual with consistent cares to work part-time to address some of our chronic EMS users so that instead of seeing them 25 or 30 times in a year, we could direct them to resources and maybe only see them once or twice in a year and manage that call volume. What that does for us is it gets the right resources to those patients, but it also keeps our medic units available for the cardiac arrest, the more serious calls that we have. In 2019, we had 8 enrollees. 3 are still open cases. We're working with them, but 5 of them were actually closed. So we're making progress on that. For this year, up to the end of July, we had 29 people we were working with 11 of those closed. So we're actually making really good progress with that PRN program, and we're looking to figure out ways to expand it and work with those other organizations to help us move forward with that. And again, it just comes down to getting the right resources to the person so we can get them the right help. Next slide is our fire incident details, which just shows in single family homes and then multifamily residences, i.e. apartment complexes, what we're doing. We had 27 fires in single family houses last year, 9 related to cooking, which is still not good, but it's getting better. False alarms are all mostly driven by smoke alarms that are going off because people are still cooking and burn food and those kind of problems. So we're still running, but we'd rather run a whole bunch of false alarms and have working smoke alarms in those, because when it does go off, it's going off for a reason. In the apartment complexes, multifamily, we had much less structure fires, only 8. We had the same number of cooking fires. Fewer false alarms because they maintain their fire alarm systems a little bit better. That's kind of where that rolls out. One noticeable change from last year to 2019 is we actually had a 50% reduction in our cooking fires. So all the work that our community risk reduction specialist, Ben Shearer, has been doing to raise awareness of our cooking fires appears to have been working, because A, we're having less fires related to cooking, and B, we're getting those false alarms taken care of as well. So speaking of that, roll right into the next slide with our community risk reduction. And this is just a chart that shows over the last 4 or 5 years how many events, smoke alarms we've serviced and installed. You can see that we really hit the smoke alarm installation and service pretty hard this year. One of the things that has changed is we're now going to the 10-year batteries. So we're seeing less people requiring that, but as we're hitting some of those magic 10, 12-year-old neighborhoods, we're going to get back in there and start replacing some of the smoke alarms in there. So we'll probably see that go up just a little bit. So, but this just shows that we're on a constant uptrend of keeping that community safe by being out there and being proactive. So it's just a whole bunch of good work that needs to happen. And truthfully, this is the stuff that you never know how many fires you prevent or injuries you prevent by the work that you do, because you never are able to tell, yeah, I prevented 3 fires, but this is very important work and one of the things that we put a lot of faith and elements and work into. The next slide, we've got to talk real quick about our injuries. We've actually been very fortunate. I talked about keeping a healthy and happy workforce. We didn't have that many injuries in 2019, and most of the injuries are related to EMS. And again, this is one of those things that's not necessarily an injury that you would typically form in your mind. This has to do with exposure to infectious diseases. Going into next year with COVID this year, we're going to see a little bit higher trend on that because of the unknowns and the exposure to a higher number of patients that are COVID positive and those kind of things. But as you can see, we only hurt 1 person this year to fire, 1 in training, and then 3 doing other things, including station maintenance and doing truck checks. And all of that you can see in the right-hand chart is the cost per injury. We had 1 injury that actually took one of our firefighters out for about 6 months and cost about $35,000 to get him fixed. That was related to a shoulder injury. We've actually implemented a very robust peer fitness program, and we trained 7 of our people over the last year to start working with our people both in their diet and their exercise and physical ability testing. So we're going to hopefully avoid even more of these injuries as we move forward. And it's an effort that's been driven not by management as much as by the workforce saying, hey, we need to take care of ourselves and we're going to invest in this program and take care of each other. And that's where we're going to prevent these injuries so we can all come to work. And the last slide I have before the final question slide is our public satisfaction. One of the things is in waiting so long to provide this report to you guys is we were actually able to get the approval rating from the National Citizen Survey. And there's the results since 2009. You can see that we've been fairly constant. We did go down a little bit in the fire and ambulance services. So we need to try to figure out what we're missing there and maybe do some very targeted reach out programs to areas. But the fire prevention and education actually went up by a point. And that's what we really like to see is people are understanding that the community risk reduction, the fire prevention and education is very important and they appreciate what we're doing. So we're going to keep looking into this and I'm sure that will be one of the strategic plan areas of research and we'll move forward. And with the last slide, you can see I put a picture of our graduating 2020-1 Recruit Academy. That was a joint, as I said, between the 3 cities. Kennewick didn't actually have any of the recruits in that picture. It's only Pasco and Richland, but they were some of the highest scoring and very driven individuals that graduated. And with that, I'll answer questions or you can direct them off to Chief Gear and see if we can get you guys taken care of. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that very detailed report. Any council members have any questions or comments?
This is Councilmember Maloney.
Yes, Mr. Maloney.
So I have to say that this is actually every other department, this is my favorite annual report by far. Both the way that the fire department is able to measure itself, the standards at which are set, and that tie back to its own goals and to the council goals is just, I really appreciate that you're taking the time to measure to yourself. Now I know that not every department has such easy metrics It's a national standard. So don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to knock everybody. I just want to really give the kudos. So, you know, one of the things that when we talk about like specificity, like looking at the community risk reduction and just how that's been able to be responsive to ongoing trends, I think that's really heartening to see that it's a flexible program that's continuing to grow, continuing to change, and for the better. And I appreciate the thoughts into that. So I did have a couple of questions. I'm not just going to pay out compliments. So one of the questions I have is looking at the apparently dreaded heat map. I think it's fantastic. So I don't understand the concerns, but so I definitely see how we're dealing with the red and yellow areas in the northwest portions of the city by our changes to our fire station locations. But I thought it was really interesting that actually over in Tierra Vida that specific location is red, and I know it was yellow last year. Can you speak at all to what we might be able to do to improve our responses there? We know that there's quite a few people in that location, and I just want to understand if there's anything we can do there, or if it's just kind of an anomalous situation.
I'd have to look specifically at what was driving those calls. I know some of the problems are just the infrastructure getting to some of that, but and then the concurrent calls as well as also some of those things. In a lot of the yellow areas instead of the green, we're right on the cusp of being, we're at 88%, 87%. So it's typically one or two calls really that are driving us into our not meeting that 90% goal that we're trying to hit. And part of it is because of the concurrent calls. I've got Station 82 and Station 84 they have another call in their area. So Station 81, which would normally serve Tierra Vida, is going to be over there handling one of their calls. Then we have that Tierra Vida call that now another station's got to go and respond to. So, and then we're actually seeing an increased amount of that. We're at almost 50% of the time we've got more than one call going on in the city, which affects our overall response time. In fact, like today, I'll just use today as an anecdotal. We actually had all four of our stations busy, and we had mutual aid units coming in from Kennewick, Richland, and Franklin 3, just because we were busy on 4 medical calls, a vehicle fire, and a couple of other things. So sometimes that's where we're right on the edge of that 90 percentile, hitting that mark. Chief Gear, did you have anything?
Yeah, I'd add, Councilman Maloney, if you look at that dark purple spot right off Lewis and just east of the railroad tracks, that's where the Oregon Street station is getting drawn into there quite a few times. And then what happens is as Chief Dunbar said, then we have another call on the east side of town, and it's got to be covered from the airport station or the Station 4 out at 48 Court, which is a long run for those guys. And at some point, that's where we're looking at how many stations and where they should be located, and whether there should be another station in that industrial area. We're as council knows, we're talking with AutoZone about the availability of property. In many instances, that station to the north on 395 can run down to the south a lot quicker than Station 2 or Station 4 can run through town, because they're on the highway and then Oregon Street. So we're looking at that. Terra Vita's out there. The one that's more concerning to me than Terra Vita is Lakeview Mobile Home Court, which has plans to put in a 200 kid early learning center, both preschool or pre-kindergarten and kindergarten. And that's that yellow dot way down there to the southeast. And we've talked to the school district a lot about that. And that's a long run to serve that area. You try and put 200 kids in that early learning center and that kindergarten. That concerns me.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing a little bit about what we might be able to see. I hope because we're seeing some infill in East Pasco, We're seeing we'll see increased industrial growth out in that area, as well as other developments that might be occurring out in that region. So, yeah, just thanks for sharing a little more details as to what where we think we're going there.
Well, I might add just
okay.
before, we're relying a lot more on the fire district across the river in Burbank to provide us aid into that southeast corner, as we're committed to other calls in the city. So that, we have a very good relationship with them and always have. And that's kind of our stopgap right now, is those guys coming across the Snake River Bridge and covering that stuff on the east end.
Great. Actually, that's being a great lead into my next question and comment. One of the slides one of the pages I thought was really interesting was looking at mutual aid received versus mutual aid provided, and I was actually pretty surprised to see that we are pretty massively a net provider of aid rather than a recipient of aid. I mean, it's significant, the amount of hours we're spending in Kennewick and Richland and out in the county. So I was, again, much more than we're receiving. And so my question on that is, I'm sure I've asked this before, but we are being reimbursed for the cost provided by mutual aid, correct?
Nope, we don't track mutual aid costs because it changes so much year by year. If Pasco had a fire downtown that we were at for 3 or 4 days and other agencies were there, then the following year, mutual aid provided would go way up. So the thing with mutual aid or automatic aid that we look at is it's a long-term investment. Now, on the other hand, since our staffing's up, we used to be a huge recipient of mutual and automatic aid because we didn't have enough people on duty to go to a regular house fire if everybody was available. Now if everyone's available, if all our units are in quarters, we can handle a single family residential structure fire with our on-duty forces. Some of the other cities have kind of tipped the other way with that. And the problem, Kennewick has more people on duty, but Kennewick has a lot of assisted living facilities that draw down their available staffing constantly. And their medic units and their engine companies are tied up with assisted living facilities. They get 2 calls a year per bed in an assisted living facility, and they have thousands of beds in those facilities, and that is drawing them down. That's an issue they're going to have to deal with. But I think the important thing to remember is we could have one fire that ties us up seriously for 2 days in a warehouse or a block of downtown, and the numbers would change completely. So I would caution you to look at those numbers over a 2 or 3 year period, not just a 1 year.
So I'll ask the natural follow-up to that. So what are our 2 to 3 year trends on this?
I would say, Chief Dunbar can help me, but historically in the past, Pasco's been a bigger receiver. This is the first year that I've looked at the report, and I'd have to go back and look at 18. I don't remember it exactly in 18, but I know in 17, we received more mutual aid than we gave. I don't remember 18. The trend has changed a little bit. And I will promise you that is a discussion that goes on at our weekly chiefs meetings when we all do our annual reports and somebody is way heavier than the other person. We talk about why that is.
Chief, I think it was Station 84 that kind of turned the tide for the city.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Mr. Zabel. I do too. That turned the tide. Before we had 84, we had to have mutual aid or auto aid on every building fire.
Yeah, just speaking historically, the 18 report really started to show that trend because we got that SAFER grant to staff Station 84, We actually started that in July 1st of 2018. And from that point on, actually, when I ran some of the mutual aid reports for Chief Gear, I gave him in early January of 19, he's like, we're doing that? I said, yeah, we are. And when I ran the numbers for 2019, that same trend continues. We're not always over there for a long period, but we are going out of our city quite a bit. And that trend is going up. But as Chief Gear said, all it takes is one bad day and we'll pay all that back. 17, I know I looked at it briefly. We were a net recipient of mutual automatic aid, and the SAFER grant in 2016 that we did for staffing 84 really did turn that from creating a hole. In fact, that's one of the reasons we went for the SAFER grant, was to basically say, hey, we're big enough, we need to take care of our own calls. And that freed up their units to, instead of coming over to us, to maintain theirs. Well, now we're in the same boat where we're helping them out. And many of the agencies have obtained SAFER grants, and we're trying to get them in service so we can continue to respond to that increase in call volume.
Great, thanks very much so much for the answers. And I don't mean to suggest that we don't want to support our fellow cities. We're all one big community here, right? And so that was certainly not intended to be my implication. I just wanted to understand better exactly how that's looking. So I appreciate you taking the time to give me the fuller picture. So anyways, thank you gentlemen so much. Great report, great data, and I think we're trending in the right direction. I'm really proud of Pasco Fire Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. Any other questions from any other council members? Well, again, Chief Dunbar and Chief Gear, thank you very much for the report. I know the philosopher Thoreau said what gets measured gets managed, and as Mr. Maloney has indicated, the data that you guys provide and keep track of really are a big positive gain here for everyone, and I hope you continue to do a good job, and appreciate you guys focusing on our goals and to achieve the best service we can for our citizens. So again, thank you very much. Well, with that, we'll go to our next topic, which is the capital improvement plan. Mrs. Sigdal.
I'm actually going to kick it off with a few introductory remarks, and then I will turn it over to Finance Director, and we'll kind of tag team our way through this.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Zabel.
So good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you for the opportunity to present the 2021-2026 Capital Improvement Plan, or CIP. And we update the plan annually, and the CIP, as you can tell from the attachments, includes a broad scope of businesses across all the city's business lines for a 6-year horizon. It's designed to align with council goals, address current and future population needs, and to promote our local economy. And it truly is a collaborative effort, beginning and ending literally with the city council through your goals and finally through the adoption of the plan. And all departments, though, in between that time, all departments are involved with the finance department and executive office at the center. It's not a wish list. 6-year TIP, which we looked at a couple months ago, is a little less constrained than this. This is a little more drilled down and a little more disciplined of a project. So what you see in this plan, more than likely is going to come to pass in one shape or another over that 6-year horizon. The CIP is a requirement of the Growth Management Act, and more importantly, though, it facilitates the city's long-range ideas and allows them to evolve from ideas and concepts to design and construction and finally reality. For that reason, you'll see that project costs fluctuate as plans solidify. And I'll talk about that again in a minute, though. But from a planning standpoint, we see the CIP evolve as projects move through different processes. So the concept process, I guess I'll call it, that's when we first start to appear or see a project maybe appear in the CIP. Oftentimes it's a placeholder. You'll see like a plug number. Some council may recall a few years ago we had plug numbers for wastewater treatment plant, or excuse me, process water reuse facility because we didn't have any real number at that point in time, but he knew it was going to be on the order of 25-ish or more $1 million. But those placeholders or concepts are based oftentimes on a council goal, or they're identified in our comprehensive system plans. It might be an ongoing operational concern where you've seen lift stations and projects like that recently. Identified in a planning document like the comp plan or an environmental impact statement, or something I think you'll see some additions next year as we complete the traffic system master plan that's currently underway. There might be opportunity driven like an LID or a developer driven project, or they might be an intergovernmental partnership such as the animal control facility. The next phase of a project we get into is the refinement, and over time CIP projects, you'll see them start to take shape as the scope becomes more clear. The relationship of the project to other infrastructure as we evaluate it further, and the funding assumptions start to unfold, and we maybe see some phasing if it's too much for the city to handle in a few years. Once it gets into the biennial budget, though, then you really start to see a project start to take shape, because now you have some money for that feasibility and planning, environmental review, design. And each one of these phases, you start to get more and more information that starts to impact costs. It may lessen the cost because we, early on without a lot of information, we might have took a big bite at a number, or it might start to add to the cost because there's things that we maybe didn't contemplate, or we run into maybe bad soils, or environmental issues might arise that we weren't aware of at the time, or related to permitting or what have you. Really, you get down to bidding and award, and that's when you can really count on the number. So as policymakers and professionals, the city council and staff has a responsibility to plan, but there's some great advantages to the committee in our doing so. The CIP is intended, and I think serves as a vehicle for strategic and effective implementation of council policy and long-range goals. It's a tool for advanced planning for future budgets. One of the things we do in the CIP process is there's a lot of moving parts to it. It's more than just the list you see in front of you. We're also comparing those to fund reserves, to projected rate revenues and expenditures, and what we might be able to handle with cash, what we might have to handle with bonds, those kind of things. So there's a lot that really goes into it behind the scenes. Certainly better coordination between projects, economies of scale, and it communicates the city's intentions to the public and investors and our partners, and it also meets the requirements that we may need to qualify for grants or loans, or the use of certain funds like the real estate excise tax to use REIT money on a city capital project. It has to be in your adopted capital facility or capital improvement plan. So with that, many projects, I did want to note many projects you may be aware of that you may not see in a 6-year plan, because they are long-range projects, and the plan is intended to capture the next 6 years. So we have you'll see some studies in there we're going to talk about tonight under transportation. For instance, the interchange at 395 and Interstate 182. It's not in the 6-year TIP plan, but it will be part of your budget request when we come to you later this fall. Many projects don't evolve from problem to analysis or solution within that 6 years. Another example is Lewis Street. Lewis Street was basically a 20-year project. It was probably on your TIP for at least that long. We're finally working our way through it. Not surprising though, those projects CIP projects can change pretty dramatically. If a grant becomes available, a project might move up. It becomes a lot more feasible if there's money. If money isn't available, or assumption about money doesn't pan out, a project might move back. New regulations might come into play, and we've seen that, particularly in the realm of wastewater treatment and out of processed water. New ideas or alternatives come into play, new technology. Partnerships may develop or dissolve. We may annex areas that require new projects, which you're going to see some of those in here tonight. You'll see, like, for instance, a large water reservoir project we'll talk about a little later. And conditions or policy direction may change. So tonight we're going to go over financial overview of the CIP. We're going to talk about completed projects. We're going to touch on some major project highlights within the draft plan. And I want to talk just a minute on the plan format. New projects are identified under the status column under the spreadsheet attachment. So there's a status column that says new or ongoing. And so that's where you'll spot the new projects. And I, want to note that this is less than what we provided over the past few years. COVID impacts has impacted our organizational bandwidth such that we're not able to provide you a revised binder like we have been able to the last few years with updated project sheets of the sort you're accustomed to. And I appreciate the council working with the spreadsheets and understanding the limitations on staff at this time. I'll assure you that next year's update will return to our regular format. The spreadsheet, though, does provide you, whether the project's new or ongoing, it provides you the expenditures required and the funding, not only the timing of it, but also the funding sources. And you'll note that many of the projects are funded through multiple sources, whether or not they may be secured. The spreadsheets will go into the timing, likely timing of the project, and it's fiscally constrained, whereas the funding is reasonably expected. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Director Sigdell, and as I mentioned, we'll tag team. She's going to go through the financing issues, and then we'll tag team going over the CIP plan highlights. And I did just mention one more thing is, I think we're all getting kind of used to these virtual meetings. I know they're a little bit clunky, but if it takes a minute to see a raised hand, please feel free to answer questions along the right way. And if we go a little ways out there, just interrupt. We'll go back and pick up wherever questions might be. It's better, I think, if we get them while we're on or near the slide than to get too far down the road. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rita.
Thank you, Mr. Zabel. Evening, Mayor and Council. I think Mr. Zabel actually covered most of what I was intending to speak on. However, you see the graph in front of you, and you will see some of the ups and downs, though. In the last 3 years, we've had increases to the CIP request. And as he mentioned, CIP is when it comes back to you next week, will be a resolution, and it has nothing to do with budgets. It is only a planning document, and the funding authorization where the council authorizes us to spend the funds listed on the plan come through during our biennial budgeting process. And if there are any changes that are required, we would come to council on a one-off basis, and those might especially happen during bids and bids approval when we really get a good picture of the total project cost. This is about a 7% increase from prior year, and a large part of increase is coming from mostly utilities area. You will see a new project, Butterfield Treatment Improvement Plan. I just forgot the project name. That is new, and that is $25 million. It is a placeholder and an estimated cost of what it would take to make the improvements to that plan. Also, some of the increases to estimates for Lewis Street Overpass and some of the projects that have been identified through our long-range planning as well. This pie chart is fairly normal with the exception of the processed water reuse facility, which many cities do not have. But you see large portions of CIP for any municipal government, especially one that is a full service, as in providing utility services. You will see water, sewer, and transportation taking up majority of the capital costs needs. In terms of the projects that are completed or projected to be completed, these are the list. There's also another slide. These are the things that have been done and completed in 2019, as well as expected to be completed by the end of this year. The only reason that we might have few projects that might linger out to 2021 would be if there's adverse weather. We did have a rough winter a couple of winters ago, and that delayed quite a few projects. But we are anticipating with normal schedule that we will complete a lot of these projects by 2020. And if you have any questions on these projects, please stop me and I will try to answer any questions you may have. Yes.
This is Councilman Toronto. It's not necessarily for you, Ms. Sigdell. You may have the answer. When I was looking back at those, I saw the Giza Stadium improvements. Do we have any ownership rights in the stadium in the event that with the cancellation of this season, if things continue to move forward, we would have any, I guess, legal ability to reclaim that property? I don't know if we have any liens against it or anything of that nature from the investments or revenue sharing. That's probably more of a city attorney question and probably not necessarily appropriate for this, but I'd be interested in finding that answer at some point.
Yeah, Councilman Serrano, this is Zach Rack, ACS Director. We can certainly track down that answer for you and get you that information.
Yeah, like I said, no rush, and hopefully we get a dust devil season next season. I'd really love to see one this year. Don't think it's realistic, but in the event we don't, we start need to potentially considering what rights we might have. Thank you.
And overall, CIP has a more looser idea of funding, just because it's not a budget document. So I want to go through some of the options, and we've tried to stay consistent in the last couple of years. So you will see terminology like current and future debt. And this is essentially where we would be issuing bonds or taking out low interest loans. They might be supported by current utility rates. There might be need for increasing our utility rates to pay for the debt service. However, we have identified that those can be done via issuance of a new debt or a current existing debt. Grants, of course, are the preferred method for any project that we have. Lack of better terminology, but to the city, it's free money. So we try to utilize and maximize that wherever we can. Internal fund reserves are mainly used in conjunction with grants. Many grants come with a cost share component to them, and especially if we can put up and match those funding and be able to get a large portion of the project funded by grant funds. That is where we usually use our internal fund reserve. And then with utilities, it is a sign of a healthy utility fund when you are doing major capital projects with at least a portion of it via rate, existing rate. Essentially what that means is that you're not leveraging yourself for every capital funds or capital costs that you are having to incur. Local partnerships, some of the examples of that you will see is Argent Road with CVC, Port of Pasco, also with Animal Shelter with the other cities, and of course our developers and property owners around the city. We just talked about LIDs, which are the local improvement districts, where the property owners would come together and pay for any improvement, upsizing of pipes and developer agreements, things like that. And then there's a portion with unknown funding, which, by the way, example would be the community center. Right now, it's currently categorized as unknown funding, but very likely it's going to be a combination of all of the items up above, the 4 items. The reason that it's in unknown funding right now is that we do not know the full scope. We're doing the site study as we speak. The need of the community currently is not clear. And hence the scope of the project there's still a lot of work to be done. So we put that in as an unknown funding, but knowing full well that it's going to be a combination of all of the above. As Mr. Zabel mentioned, all internal funds are fully secured for the next biennium. And we do that so that we're not having to do double work for our biennial budgeting. And outside of that, we're doing our analysis and making sure that most of our projects are sustained if we're identifying internal funds. However, that always changes, especially if you have big project like Lewis Street and the bids come in lower or they come in higher than expected, and that either reduces our availability of internal funds or increases our availability of internal funds. As I mentioned in the agenda report, the process right now for the city staff, regardless of the funding situation or COVID or a recession, is we evaluate every project as it comes, because we do not want to make a decision and stick to that decision even if things have changed between a start of a project versus the approval of the budget. So Public Works Department, who does majority of our projects, is always evaluating the funding, the priority, the need, and scope, and working with city manager's office and of course the council to make any changes if necessary. And of course, there's the construction. Council has to approve all of the bids above a certain limit, and so you have that another layer of approval after the biennial budget process. And as you can see, we have two different graphs or bars for utility and non-utility. And the reason for that is because how it gets funded really is different for these two different categories. In utility, you'll see a lot of current and future debt. I was not in municipal government back then, but I would say maybe 20 years ago, that would have been different. Maybe we would have gotten more grants or low interest loans. Those are not as available anymore from the state. And so many municipalities and special districts are having to fund that through revenue bonds. And so you will see that. We also have grants to a certain extent, and of course internal fund reserves, which are the ratepayers, essentially the rate revenue. But then on the non-utility side, which is our fire, our general projects, and transportation, you will see a lot more grants, which is mostly transportation projects where a lot of grant comes in, and internal fund reserves, which are matching for those grants, and local partnerships as well. And you'll see the unknown, which is an example is the community center, and I also believe the Sacagawea levy lowering as well. Any questions so far? Okay. So what follows are some project highlights with different categories as they're listed out on our sheet. For fire, you'll see majority of the work getting done this biennium and the next biennium. When I first started with the city, fire barely had few lines. In fact, it was all mixed in with general fund. But because there were so many capital improvements happening, we've made them their own category. And by the end of 2021, we're expecting Fire Station 83 and 84 replacement to be done, but then looking into Station 85. And I just want to highlight that just because, again, it's here does not mean that it will be done, and it will be done in that schedule and in that amount. There's a lot to process between now and then. And of course, we have COVID that is looming over us. And the impact to that is not seen as of right now because there's been a lot of help and support, I think, to Americans through federal government. But then at some point, we do expect to see the economic impact of COVID to the national economy and then to the local economy. So how that will present itself is the big unknown. And people are really struggling to predict that at this point, since it's it's an unprecedented crisis. And we'd have to go back to 1918 to really see how it would all play out. There were no new projects that were added to this category, but some of the completed projects or anticipated to be completed projects are the Station 81 and 82 remodel, and with that, the station alerting system that is being added to those stations, as well as the training facility bathrooms. Of course, Station 83 and 84, we've talked about it quite a bit. We've revised the project cost estimates for these two projects down, and those are based on the bids and an expectation of, or a better understanding of what we expect the cost to be. And of course, the Station 85, we have purchased the land, and at this point, we need something to address the growth. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just had a question.
Yeah.
On that particular slide there, the cost, the estimated cost for those stations, does that include the equipment or is that just the buildings?
Those are just the buildings.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Does not include the, because they're relocations, you would move the engine and the ambulance
Sure.
from the old station.
Yeah, I understand.
Actually, Richa,
Yes,
actually, I put $1 million on top of the bid for the construction project for those stations. So we're very well covered with both of those station projects for soft costs that may come up.
yes. Were you asking about the fire trucks or just equipments that would go in the building?
Yes, both.
Both, okay.
Yeah, I did, no, he basically answered the question, the $1 million of soft cost for, you know, whatever it is.
Yes.
Equipment inside the building versus, you know, an extra fire truck or something like that. But anyway, that answered my question. Thank
Okay.
you, Mr. Gear.
And with Station 85, there is unsecured funding for design and construction, and those are conversations that will need to be ongoing, especially as we wade through COVID-19, but then also the growth to the west and weigh our choices as better information comes along. Some of the general projects, you'll see animal shelter, the Little League parking lot. Yes.
Sorry, before we move on from the fire department, I just wanted to highlight, you mentioned briefly that the costs had declined from our original estimates, and I just wanted to point out that it was something like, over $5 million of reduced cost on this. And so I think that's something that's really worth highlighting. We in government rarely hear opportunities for our costs to go down. That's a significant amount of reduction in cost. And I know that those were largely actual bids that came in under cost. And that was a lot of pencil sharpening by our fire department, who were able to identify those opportunities for cost savings and make sure the scope was just right for what our firefighters need and what the community needs without being extravagant. So I just wanted to really highlight that this is a heck of a good news story to see a decrease of $5.3 million in these projects. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. Yes, you're correct. It is a significant amount and probably should be mentioned at the very least.
Thank you.
No new projects were added to the general area, but as you'll see, the Giza Stadium improvement is expected to be completed, if it's not already been completed, this year. And of course, animal shelter is something that is in our minds. Like with many things, COVID has delayed few things here, but I believe we've been working on completing the cost alternatives and also working with our partners, City of Kennewick and Richland, and of course the community partners for the best alternative. So the anticipation is to still keep with the schedule and complete this project. However, there's still some work to be done in this arena. Community center, I touched on that a little bit earlier. We are doing the site study, and of course with that and what the community would want in terms of a community center will really depend on that feedback and that land to figure out exactly what the scope of the project is going to be. What you see in the CIP is an estimate, and that of course will change with all of the factors that I just mentioned. With Parks and Recreation.
This is Councilmember Alvarado.
Yes.
From the last slide, obviously, I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but for instance, the community center, how do we determine the community need, and how does that may work? I don't know if someone could speak to that briefly.
Yeah, Councilmember Alvarado, this is Zach Rakai, ACS Director. The feasibility and use study really is the factor that we want to use as the city to determine what the community need is, how this facility could best serve the needs of the community, and where the most ideal location would be to serve those needs. So really, that's where we're taking that pause to study this, to make sure that we're building an optimal facility and having the right activities and strategy as far as how we serve the community with that facility.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that in the future. Thanks.
You're welcome.
With Parks and Recreation, you will not see huge variation other than the change in cost to Sacagawea levy lowering. A pretty significant change to that as well. I believe in the tune of about $2.5 million from prior estimate. And the reason for that is that we're about 30% design, and we're just getting better estimates in terms of scope of the project and how much it would cost to implement it or construct it. No new projects added in this arena as well. And there's quite a few completed projects like the Chapel Hill Park, Kurtzman Shelter. We're expecting Peanuts Parks to be completed as well, though I have included a slide just because it's such a prominent project. And Schlegel Park and Boat Basin improvements and Sylvester Park sporting courts. One of the biggest projects in this arena is, or area is the Community Park Northwest. And the goal for that is to look for a land and purchase it this year. The funding for the land purchase in itself is secured. However, there's a lot of work to be done on the design and the construction, and those are all unsecured funds at this point. Peanuts Park, it is expected to be completed this year. You recently declined a bid. The bidding process is ongoing, and it'll be out for bid here soon. The goal is to complete that project by the end of this year. Sacagawea levy lowering, just mentioned it. We changed the estimated cost. We're also pursuing RCO grant for this. And if we receive that, would be great, especially for Parks project and one of this scale. It is hard to find internal funds to fully fund them. With that, I will
Okay,
pass
kicking
this
it
on to
back
Mr.
over
Zabel.
to me for transportation. So, transportation, as council's pretty familiar with by now, that's a fairly aggressive area. There's a lot of money spent in that. And you'll see the 6-year plan, just from 21 to 26, not including current year, is just approaching $67 million. So you see a lot of projects. Let's go to the, or do it. Let's see, is this working? Oh, I got it. Yep, I got it. Okay, so I won't go into that spreadsheet because the numbers are pretty tough to read, but you can see the new projects added. There's several, and a lot of those are coming from a number of sources. Certainly council and staff have heard, particularly over the last couple of years, A lot of need up at 100th along the interchanges and up in that area, Road 68. Power line pathway has been something we've all been talking about for a while, but it reflects a lot of the community sentiment and a lot of the community sentiment that we read regarding bicycles and pedestrian access in the National Community Survey as well. A couple of completed projects that we should have the signing and striping improvements at Road 68 in Burden complete this fall. That's going to improve things in that very busy convention intersection. And then Wrigley Drive extension as well should be completed, substantially completed this year. So the next slide kind of shows you a little bit of that bike ped access focus, and you can see a number of projects out there that'll address several issues throughout the city, including the FCID canal and our interchanges and pathways. So, and traffic signal controller. This is kind of it's a little bit of a boring one, unless maybe you started your career as a traffic signal technician. It might be exciting, but we completed phase 1 about a year ago. And phase 2, estimated pretty close to $4 million. We'll complete the rest of our controllers in the city, upgrading those. And as I shared with council at the time a few years ago when this first came on the CIP, a lot of those controllers were the vintage of controllers I worked on at the beginning of my career. So they're timely for an upgrade. Lewis Street, I won't go into a whole lot of details on Lewis Street overpass, but I'll flip back to Lewis Street corridor improvements, 2nd to 5th, and this is this area that'll tie in where the bridge lands, right about 2nd, on over to 5th Avenue along Lewis, right through the heart of downtown. And this will be widened sidewalks, it'll be street furniture, upgraded lighting, electrical and plantings, and really kind of help dress up that downtown block, 4 blocks in our downtown area, and kind of tie that whole Lewis Street overpass project right into downtown, right down into the Peanuts Park and Plaza area. So that's about a $2 million cost for that. And then of course Lewis Street overpass. We have better numbers now for that, or it's more accurate. The cost estimate went up a little bit because design's complete. We have the railroad figured out and what their requirements are, and so we saw the cost jump up, but we're still reasonably, well, we're still 100% funded and ready to go on that project. Just awaiting the railroad signatures now, as council is aware. You approved just the other night the easement that was been executed on our end, and it's on its way to BNSF for their action. And then I told you a little bit about the studies and analysis. They're not in the CIP, but I wanted you to be aware of them. These are some areas that staff is proposing we're going to look at, and they'll be in our budget request or recommendation to council. 44th and Argent Road intersection analysis, Interstate 182 and Road 68, getting a better handle on that. 182 and 395, and this is out of interstate corridor study we did about 4 years ago, and we're ready to take on that piece there to see if we can add better access out into that area onto 395, potentially eastbound access, for on-ramp there. And then traffic analysis for the Route 12, A Street and Tank Farm interchanges. And again, this is a project that was highly conceptual many, many years ago. There hasn't been a lot of talk of it. We want to resurrect that project and see if we can't deal with those 2 at-grade intersections on SR 12 out in that area and make that area much more safe. So with that, is there any questions on transportation projects? Okay, that's good news because it all sounds pretty familiar to you. So we'll move on to irrigation.
Sorry, Mr. Zabel?
Oh, yes.
Sorry, I apologize. I was on mute. as I want to do. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the attention to multimodal transportation and the new products that were added. I think that was really a good way to strengthen our transportation program overall. And I know it's something, as you indicated, we've heard from the community, and I think that all of us have heard a lot about the needing to be very careful about the safety of pedestrians and bicyclists, especially making sure that we have that. The full corridor of safe travel for people on that are not driving. Having that continuous pathways and such are going to be really key. So, I just wanted to say that really pleased to see that, and thank you.
Okay, great. And I would just add one comment to that, and that is, of course, council passed the Complete Streets Ordinance not that long ago, just a couple of years ago. And so going forward, our projects I think will address those kind of needs, bike and ped needs pretty well. We've got a lot of retrofitting to do, and I think we'll see a lot of projects come out of the Transportation System Master Plan over the next year or so. So on to... okay.
When I'm also looking at the overpasses, like for example, the Sylvester Street overpass and the pedestrian access there, I know that definitely firmed up in the CIP, and I'm excited to see that, as well as the Road 68 and Road 100 areas, especially get improved. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so process water reuse. You notice we have a considerable amount of investment in that area, $36.5 million over the plan period, but also we're in the process of completing the irrigation pump station, which in itself is several $1 million. So total investment in a 7-year period is going to be closer to $46 million out there. And for the benefit of the public and a reminder to the council, much of that is going to be paid for by the processors themselves in the use of it, and most likely through debt for much of it. No new projects added at this point in time because we're continuing to do some evaluations. So we have some plug numbers in there, but we haven't added a lot of projects. Completed projects, as I mentioned, the IPS a few minutes ago, the irrigation pump station, that'll be completed here very soon. And then we have some design ongoing. We have some funding, partially funded for primary and secondary treatment out at the plant. We're evaluating engineering alternatives right now, working with the processors. And we have that $30.7 million is a plug number. There's numbers out there pushing $95 million. So it really depends on what gets built over the years, what kind of land we need to purchase, what kind of technology we employ. There's some advantages from a sustainability standpoint on the higher end number that I gave you that could pan out, but we're still looking at that, and we'll be giving council a more detailed presentation on some of those alternatives, very high level, in about 2 weeks.
And I would also add, we had a discussion on this earlier, continue to working with the processors to see, to always look into new technology on perhaps maybe pre-treating it before it goes into the treatment plant. Just bringing that up as we're moving forward to try to maximize the use of our treatment plant.
Right. Okay, so if there are any more questions on process water reuse, on to sanitary sewer. And again here, you can see, my apologies, $71 million worth of proposed improvements out there. That's over a 6-year period. That's a pretty sizable number. And, we have a plant that's pretty old. And we have outfall issues to deal with. And excuse me. That outfall is from the original plant. So we have a diffuser out. There's a lot of work out there, as well as processes at the plant on the secondary treatment side. Some new projects added one significant one, the southeast industrial trunk line was added as a potential project in last year's CIP, and we didn't have any costs included. If council might recall that we just put that in there as a line because or as a line item with no dollars attached, because we were just sort of parsing that out and trying to figure out what alternatives we might have. I think we've spent a lot of time this year doing modeling and flow measurements and things like that, and I think I've reached a pretty good conclusion, a pretty supportable conclusion that the Court Street trunk line, if we were to try to add all of the UGA area into it, would get pretty full, particularly as the Riverview area starts to fill up and sewer, which it's in the middle of our UGA, it will eventually. And, we're talking a 2,800 acre expansion out there in our urban growth area. So we're gonna have to bring a line basically across the north of the airport that would bring that sewage to the east from the new urban growth area out there from the east over to the railroad track area and then down south. That's an expensive proposition. The good thing about it is we have about 2,800 acres worth of development to share in that. So it should not impact our ratepayers significantly at all. So, Mayor, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay.
This is Councilmember Alvarado.
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate seeing this. I'm curious about the, I guess this, as we add new technology and new portions to this, as it's an aging infrastructure. How do we manage what's compatible with, are these things made so that as we replace certain functions or certain aspects of it, there's compatibility with old and new technology? Just curious how that works, and how do we evaluate that and make sure that we are not going to have to replace a large portion, or how do we forecast for that?
Well, one of the things with our CIP plan, and I don't have the number for you right now, is there's a lot of rehabilitation because, all these things are made out of metal and concrete, and pumps wear out, and so they have a certain lifespan, and so we want to make them last as long as we can. And the materials we use today, for instance, the southeast industrial trunk line that I just mentioned, that'll probably be HDPE. My apologies for the high density polyethylene pipe. That's a pipe that'll last 150 years. And some of the pipe that we're going to need to replace, and you see it on the schedule in the Court Street corridor, which it's not that old. I mean, we're talking 30 years old, 35 years old, is concrete. And concrete, gases work on it, and other things work on it that don't work on the way high density polyethylene. So a lot of the projects that we do from a material standpoint are for users that we basically use the system up. Those of us that have older homes and have been discharging into that system for a long time. And then the newer folks are going to have to pay for new lines to get to them. And then these places like lift stations and that are collection points or treatment facilities, those are kind of a shared cost. Those are going to be paid for because things wear out by existing ratepayers and by new growth. So it just kind of works out pretty well that way, because from an equity standpoint, because our systems in many respects on the treatment and pumping category are pretty aged out. And so everyone needs some improvement. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Okay. So completed projects, you've heard a little bit about 9th and Washington lift station, and you've heard about Maitland lift station. So those will be completed this year. my apologies. Northwest Area Lift Station, this is one we're working on with developers. And so this is the, if you, council may recall, the Palish Home subdivision that's east of the Adams property. It's at a low spot, and we'll be partnering with them to put some dollars into a lift station at that point to serve that entire area. And as part of that, we'll probably have a special surcharge in that area to capture those upfront costs the city would have to put in for that lift station. This has been in the CIP for a while, but I think it was worth the discussion because it's really starting to become a reality at this point in time with the LID just to the east of it through the Adams property starting to come together. Wastewater treatment improvements, talked a little bit about those already. I'll note that there is some low interest funding available that we've captured and then are pursuing right now. And I think that low interest funding, we're talking the 1-2% range. Stormwater, this has not been a super active place for council to have a lot of discussion. It just kind of goes along because a lot of our stormwater is handled with infiltration, but we do have some areas in town that require some attention. And you can see about $1.4 million over the 6-year period, and it's just a lot of it's just annual rehabilitation projects and some pipe relining, things like that. Completed projects. The North Industrial Way infiltration retrofit project is complete, and that's basically putting dry wells in and infiltrating that roadway water into the ground out there. So has a lot of benefit for the community for us to do that and for operations. Utilities irrigation. Again, not a huge amount of money here. As council may recall, that's an area of about 25-30% of the city, mostly with the exception of the old DNR property that's now subdivisions, mostly to the north of Road 68 between Road 100 and about Road 40-ish. And there's a couple $1 million worth of projects there. We aren't adding any new projects, and we really didn't complete any. We have some rehabs that we're going to be working on. And we, as council recall, we did have a little bit of a problem at the Columbia River intake. Basically, this project is to take the one that we're utilizing right now on a temporary basis with water and convert that over to irrigation. And we had that warranty covered failure at the new water intake that's I think approaching operation again, and so we'll be making that connection. It probably is not going to happen this year though. And then we have some well capacity upgrades that allow us to pump our irrigation wells at a higher rate that matches the water rate that we have out of those wells. There's that project. Sorry about that. So utilities, water department, Butterfield treatment plant. Director Sigdell had mentioned that. That's an expensive plan, and as you haven't seen that before, except as a plug number, and we're in the process of doing that facilities plan now for that, and so you're going to see that number tighten up over the coming couple of cycles. So that's a new project that's added, and then some completed projects. The chlorine safety project at Butterfield, I think that came on the CIP probably 4 years ago, and so that's complete now. And some localized water replacement. Another project I think we're pretty excited about is the emergency power improvements. Right now, a lot of our pumping facilities do not have backup power. So the power goes out, theoretically people come out of water or be out of water. So we're in the process of making those design for those improvements as well as part of our long range plan. And then a big project, again, like the industrial sewer, northwest sewer line that we're building across the north side of the airport. We're gonna need water storage up in that area as well for the newly to be annexed and developed urban growth area. And so these next two projects, the reservoir, which is about almost a $12 million project, and the water line to serve that reservoir at about $3 million will serve that area, but it's at an elevation where it's going to serve the entire city. So it's going to provide a lot more storage than we have right now for fire flow, and a lot more opportunities for pressure as well where we might need it because of its elevation for the entire city. That's going to be the highest reservoir elevation in our city. So we're pretty excited about what that might be able to do for the operation of our city. And then, of course, we talked about this one before too, and that's the West Pasco Water Treatment Plant. It's a new filter that we put in there, basically doubling the capacity of that plant to 6 million gallons, to 12 million gallons per day. And that goes along with the raw water intake project that was completed just this last year. So we have a couple of ongoing, like transportation, we have some things we're doing in water. I mentioned the Butterfield Water Treatment Facility Plan, which is not in the CIP. So again, we're going to see new information come out of that that's going to impact our CIP in future years. Our comprehensive transportation plan, which I mentioned, we're doing an amendment to the sewer comp plan to accommodate particularly the new growth area. And then we have an information services organizational assessment, which I think will help us do a much better job managing IS technology across the city. Right now, it's kind of been a what do we need and how many of them do we need kind of process, and we want to get that a little bit more sophisticated than that, so folks can rely on it. A lot of our efforts gone because of out of necessity into police and fire, and that's we're constantly putting out a fire, no pun intended, in those two places, and we want to do it a little bit more strategically. So with that, if there's any questions, council, I think Director Sigdell had kind of gone over the spreadsheets, but we're happy to, if council has any questions about anything we talked about in the PowerPoint or in the spreadsheets, happy to answer any questions. Or we can do it during the week before next week as well. So,
Thank you, Mr. Zabel, and Richa for that. Anybody have any questions or comments they'd like to add? Wonderful. Yeah, so, something that is very important for us to have and continue to work on it, and very interested to see how this all pans out at the end. All right, thank you for that report. Next, we'll move into a public access easement from the Coca-Cola Company, and I believe that's Mr. Worley from Public Works. Are you on the line?
Yes, sir, I am, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, and good evening, council members. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, you're coming in loud and clear.
Great. Well, tonight we're going to talk about the potential to vacate a little bit of an access easement and replace it with another one. Let me begin with a little bit of background. Back in 2016, the council vacated a portion of Henry Street, which is right where the Coca-Cola Company is, just to the east of Road 34, as you can see on that map. It's between Road 34 and Highway 395. That is where the mobile home park is. I think it's Riviera Village. Mobile home park is right there in the southeast corner of that area. And part of the reason for that vacation is that Coca-Cola was planning to do an expansion of their facility, and they purchased the property to the south. And the only way that that expansion could work is if part of the right-of-way were vacated. And so council passed this ordinance vacating Henry Street. And if you go to the next slide, please. When the Coca-Cola company prepared their plans to expand their building, the plan was to create a loading dock area. And in the next slide, there is a map showing how that loading dock area encroached upon the, there it is, encroached upon the vacated Henry Street right-of-way. And so Coca-Cola was required to grant an access easement to the city so that the public could still get around the loading dock area and through the Coca-Cola property. So you can kind of see in these two documents where the access easement was provided. You can see in some of the darker shading, the access easement that was granted, the vacated right-of-way, and then the 24-foot access easement as well. And what we found out was that when we went to go to try to stripe that area so the public knew where the public access easement was, so the trucks would stay out of it and the cars knew where to go as they crossed the Coca-Cola property, you'll see in the next slide that there is an aerial photo showing the trucks at the loading docks, and those are Coca-Cola's trucks, and they were sitting right at the edge of where the public access easement is currently located. The picture to the right shows another type of truck that is actually longer than Coca-Cola's trucks, and it actually sticks out into the public access easement. And so Coca-Cola has asked if we could accept a relocated easement a little further to the south. And so if you go to the next slide, you will see a map that shows the vacated right-of-way. It shows the area of where the loading dock is. That's the orange line there. And what Coca-Cola would like to propose is to vacate the area that is hatched and colored in green, which was previously dedicated. And in place of that, they would like to dedicate the revised location for the public access easement, which is kind of shown in that orange tan. I'm not sure what color it is, but that would a little further to the south. And so the legal descriptions have been developed. The first one you see there at the top right is the one that would be granted to relocate the easement. It's a 24-foot wide access easement, and our operations staff would go in and stripe that so that the public knew where the easement was located so they could stay within it, and the trucks would stay out of it. They couldn't block it. They would certainly pass through the easement area because they'd have to get their trucks down into the loading docks and back out of the loading dock. But they couldn't stay in that public access easement. And then the bottom legal description on the right is the area to be vacated and the legal description for that. So the next slide kind of summarizes this topic, and basically we are looking to see if council would be okay with relocating the public access easement across the Coca-Cola property about 12 feet further south to accommodate the larger trucks that use that loading dock. And to do that, Coca-Cola is asking to vacate a portion of the existing easement and grant a new one. And we'll get out there and we'll stripe it and sign it per the manual on uniform traffic control devices so that it's much safer than it has been in the last several years. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Worley. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Councilman David Milne. And as you know, I've been working on this project just because of the complaints and issues that we've had since this property is in my district. I did have a question for Steve Worley that will there be signs as far as the speed limit? Because I know when I've witnessed people have gone flying through there, and I know that's dangerous. I'm surprised there hasn't been more accidents considering how crazy some people drive through that parking lot. So, and then I will say it's a step in the right direction. I don't think it's a long-term plan, but it's, in my opinion, a step in the right direction, striping it and doing what we can, because I have seen kids walking through this and seeing the trucks move in and out. But my main question was the signage. What are they speed signage, or what kind of, can you clarify what kind of signage we're going to have in that area?
Yeah, if you, council member, if you were to go back to the previous slide that showed the aerial photo, or if our Zach could go back to that slide, the engineer who prepared our striping and signage plan is recommending that there be a 15-mile-an-hour sign posted, which is a typical one when you have a situation like this where cars are going around an obstruction. And if you were to look at the signage that's on either side of the trucks that are in that photo, they're labeled as MUTCD turn warning signs. Those are called chevron signs. And that indicates that there is a concrete wall there that helps support the loading dock. And it's recommended that we put up 15-mile-an-hour signs to slow people down around that obstruction.
Okay, will there also be like a blinking light, or is it just a sign?
It's just a sign as proposed right now.
Okay. Well, sounds better than nothing. I just know that it's been a huge issue with the residents in the trailer park trying to get through there, and I guess we'll just take it one step at a time. Thank you for doing this.
Mr. Worley, is with that aerial photo there, I mean, obviously there's enough room for the trucks to maneuver, and then they back up across the street to back up into the loading dock. Is that still vacant? Is that a current aerial?
It is fairly current. The area to the south is vacant. Coca-Cola owns that area to the south as well. So trucks would likely come in off of Road 34, and they would turn south into this area south of the easement, and then they would back up across the easement and down into the loading dock.
Well, it only makes sense to me, especially since they own that place, that, I mean, it's unsafe the way it is now with the trucks sticking out. They own that property there to the south. I don't see an issue with it. You know, if we can put, I would suggest, you know, one of those solar lights where maybe you can get a blinking light on the speed limit there, just because of the congestion and the traffic and how close the trucks will be to the road anyway. But I'm good with it to grant this access and to allow this to happen. So it just makes sense that we accommodate them, especially since they're a good business for our community and there's space there. So I'm good with it. Thank you.
You bet. We'll plan on bringing if the rest of the council is agreeable, we'll plan on bringing a resolution to council next week to make it official.
All right.
This is Councilmember Maloney. I wanted to second some of Mr. Milne's concerns. I've been across that street, and I can certainly say that it was, it really felt like a strange way to be driving on a public access that felt very much like I was driving across an industrial parking lot. My question is, I understand the desire to continue to have that intersection to the west to be a 90-degree at all sections there, but this really looks like, in the state it is now, it's certainly not the way we would have liked to plan it. Is this really that kind of U-shaped? Is that the best we can do for safety? Or would moving the intersection with Road 34 south, so that's a straight section there and only one bend going up to the north around those trucks, would that make more sense? I fear that that this is going to be ripe for continued problems as this is currently laid out.
Two thoughts in response to that. One would be, typically when we design road intersections, and especially when they're across from each other on a cross street, we generally try to specifically design them so that they line up with each other. That makes the people who are turning left and right off of each of those streets a much safer situation, because you're putting them directly across from each other and they can see each other and what they're doing. So whenever we have situations where the intersections are offset from each other on the east side versus the west side, we try to fix that and put them directly across from each other. So our goal here is to try to maintain the safer alignment of having the two together. The second thought that I would share would be that having this, and I'll call it a chicane for lack of a better term, but having this U-shaped thing is something that can be used at times for traffic calming purposes. So this may be one way to help slow the traffic down. Once it's striped, they know that they have to be careful to go around the curves in the easement and around the truck. So the hope would be that based on the layout of it, people would slow down naturally.
I really appreciate those thoughts. This is one of those where we've clearly shoehorned in something to accommodate for commercial and industrial purpose. But goodness gracious, it's a mess. I appreciate this is as good as we can do at this point in time, and I hope this improves the safety for those neighbors there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. Okay, well, Mr. Worley, sounds like we can bring the resolution and have the council vote on it. Did you say next week?
That would be preferred, yes.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for that report, and we're looking forward to that for next week. Moving right along to the Community Development Block Grant Annual Work Plan and Allocations. Let's see, we have tonight.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, we just need a minute just to pull up her presentation.
Okay.
Do we have to get her?
Angie, you have control now.
Okay.
Hello, Angie. How you doing tonight?
Pretty good so far. Trying to figure out how to get share my screen.
I believe we're seeing it now. Or was seeing it.
Okay. Okay, can you see it now?
We were seeing it, but we are not seeing it currently.
Okay, let me go back to where I was. Which screen are you seeing?
We are not seeing your screen at all. Oh, there we go. We see it now.
Okay. Okay, good evening, Mayor, Council. The item before you tonight is the CDBG Annual Action Allocation and Work Plan. Hang on just a second, I can't see. Okay, sorry. Is the annual action or allocation and work plan for the 2021 CDBG program year. Earlier this year, HUD approved the 5-year consolidated plan that was before you last year. HUD established, the plan established goals and objectives for program years 2020 through 2024 and is required to receive CDBG and home grant funds. This is the second year of the annual action plan. At the close of the program year, a consolidated annual plan evaluation report is prepared and reports on progress during that, during the previous plan year. Okay, so we have estimated funds available for use in 2021 of just over $1 million. It's from entitlement funds, prior year reallocations, and estimated program income. In April and May of this year, we published an ad in the Tri-City Herald and to the Cetus, opening the annual grant cycle for 2021. There were 16 proposals received for a little under $2 million, leaving a deficit of about $1 million. This is kind of a snapshot of all the proposals received. We had about 41% of those proposals were for physical improvements, 26% for economic development activities, 11% for public services, 3% for housing. Planning and administration was about 8% of that total, and then the Section 108 debt is 11%. The selection criteria for the projects is that it has to meet a national objective to benefit primarily low to moderate income households in Pasco. The eligibility criteria for the projects is defined in 24 CFR 570. The activities have to meet a consolidated plan, goal, and objective that was established in the prior year, and meet a local need per our resolution 1969. The qualified applicant needs to demonstrate some capacity, and the project scope and budget needs to exhibit feasibility. So in June and July, public hearings were held before the Planning Commission where proposals were presented and discussed. Resolution 1969 named the Planning Commission as the advisory committee and provides guidance based on city goals. Physical improvements is currently one of the highest needs, and economic development is shortly behind it. At the July Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission recommended proposal or funding as recommended. These projects here are organized by project type: administration, public services, technical assistance are pretty much on this page, and they primarily pay for staff to administer programs, scholarships, and project delivery at the Pasco Specialty Kitchen. Many of the projects that were recommended are for ongoing activities, and funding is recommended at the same level as the prior year. Due to lack of funds available, not all projects can be funded. Projects that are not funded are included in the annual action plan as a contingency project. The projects on this screen are for economic development, housing assistance, public facility and infrastructure improvements, and code enforcement. Contingent projects are annotated with asterisks, and if funds become available during the program year, those projects may be funded without having to go through an additional public review process. So we won't know until spring of next year, when Congress passes the budget, how much will be available from entitlement funds. So if we receive less than is anticipated, we will reduce projects proportionately to maintain public service and admin caps. In September, the annual action plan will be published for public comment for 30 days. And in the spring, when HUD publishes the 2021 allocations, the annual action plan supplement will be updated and submitted to HUD for approval. With that, are there any questions on the proposed projects?
Thank you, Angie. Council, any questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Councilmember Maloney.
Yes, Mr. Maloney.
Yes, Mr. Pittman, I had a question regarding specifically the project for the facade improvements. I know that we've had a program in the past to do such facade improvements, and it was not necessarily well received by a number of the businesses. I think there was constraints on, gosh, it might have even been prevailing wages need to be used and such, so it ended up being a bit of a bureaucratic nightmare as well as a fairly expensive proposition. Is there any differences in the proposal as to how this is going to be handled to make sure this is an effective use of the money?
Unfortunately, we are kind of stuck with the prevailing wages. This proposal is for one application that we received last year that we didn't have sufficient funds to cover. So this would basically cover that one facade.
This is a named business who has applied in the last year and is willing to be funded this year for that facade improvement.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the council? So it sounds like you might bring it to the next meeting for approval, Angie?
Yes, bring it forward to the next meeting for action.
All right, sounds good. One more time for, one more opportunity for questions or comments. All right, well, thank you very much, Angie. I believe you're gonna just go ahead and go to the next item with the 2021 home annual work plan and allocation.
Yes.
Okay.
The 2020, this is for the 2021 home annual allocation and work plan. Pasco is a member of the Tri-Cities Home Consortium by interlocal agreement in order to receive these funds, and in 2019, we renewed that agreement through 2020. This item was also before the Planning Commission in June and July.
Okay.
We estimate entitlement funds of $163,000 plus program income of $100 for $263,000. And with that, we proposed 25 down payment assistance loans for the $263,000.
Okay. Any questions or comments from council? Real quickly, Angie, so do we know how many, how many in the past year? Oh, there was 73 Pasco first-time home buyers. So 73 got some assistance through this program?
That was for program years, I think it was from 2015 through 2020.
Oh, okay.
We kind of slowed down last year, but we're starting to pick up again with the new development over in the Crispin Park area. And so we expect there to be quite a few more down payment assistance loans to be able to go through, plus the interest rates are favorable now.
Okay. And will this come to the council for next week as well?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right, I'll just give one more opportunity for any questions or comments for Angie.
Hi, Angie. This is Councilmember Roach. How are you this evening?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good. I was just curious about the neighborhood stabilization program. I didn't see it in either of the reports, and just wondering about whether that's still active.
The neighborhood stabilization program was closed a number of years ago, and we have had an application in with HUD to roll that program income into CDBG to be able to be used to continue that program. So it'll be program income, and it'll be used for down payment assistance for foreclosed properties or for rehabilitations for foreclosed properties. So it's not on the agenda tonight because it's actually rolled into the CDBG.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman Roach. All right, Angie, well, we'll wait for it for next week and take action on it, next week in our next meeting. So thank you very much for this report.
Thank you.
All right, so next we'll go into our next, agenda item, which is miscellaneous council discussion. Mr. Zabel, do you have anything you'd like to share tonight?
I just have two quick items. We did have a brief visit with Representative Newhouse today at Wade Park. He was part of a contingent from Tridec, and they were looking at reconveyance properties in the Tri-Cities area. So Director Ratkind I met him out there along with David Replog and a few others, and we're able to show him our mapping and brief him on the levy lowering project and just kind of discuss council's resolution relating to the reconveyance. And then secondly, want to note that we have the 2019 and 2020 Municipal Excellence Awards at the back of the council chambers. 2020 being the Historic African American Properties, 2019 being, well, you can tell by the picture, the fire department.
Oh, yeah.
But, so when council gets back, you got something to look at back there.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Zabel. I just have one item I'd like to bring up, and we got an email on where the latest Central Washington Census response rate, and Franklin County is at 64.4%. When is the deadline for the census, Mr. Zabel? You know that off the top of your head?
I do not know off the top of my head, but I know they moved it up a month.
Okay.
I want to say the end of September, but I don't want to put faulty information out, so I will confirm that
Okay.
and check.
Well, I just, I got an email on that, and I see that we are doing okay compared to other counties, but it's only okay. Walla Walla is ahead of us with 68.2, Walla Walla County, that is. So, and Benton County is at 72%. So I just want to encourage everyone and all the council members to communicate to all your constituents as well as much as we can to please complete your census. It's vital for funding and for opportunities that we may have here in Franklin County. So I just wanted to give that information out and encourage everyone to complete their census if they haven't already done so. It took me and my wife about 5 to 10 minutes, so it can be done quickly. Just please go in and complete it. All right. Anybody else with any miscellaneous discussion?
This is Councilmember Roach, and I guess I want to just answer that question you had, Mayor Martinez. The deadline for census moved up a month, so it's end of September. But the other comment that I wanted to pass on to staff for consideration that was brought up to me by resident Mr. Kidwell was, would we consider moving our long-term planning session outdoors with social distancing, et cetera, to Walla Walla County? And so the conversation that we had was even to someplace like Hood Park, which is just across the Snake River and still very accessible for people in Pasco to make it to if they wanted to be in person, but outdoors. So I just wanted to put that out there. I know that it may not be feasible to do that outside of our jurisdiction, but wanted to pass that on because that was expressed to me as a concern and a desire to have that held in public.
Take that into consideration. Thank you, Councilwoman Roach. Anybody else? All right. If not, do we have a need for an executive session tonight, Mr. Zabel? We do not. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us. It was a long and productive meeting, and have a great evening. Remember to stay safe, and we'll see you next week. This meeting is now adjourned.